All right, just for the sake of time, I know we have a really great packed agenda and only an hour with our amazing speakers. So let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the South Queens Women's March Women's History event. We're so excited to host this discussion with three incredible powerhouses on their journeys and experiences in leadership. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to South Queens Women's March. And for some of our familiar faces, welcome back. For folks that are new, South Queens Women's March is a local organization that was founded at the height of the pandemic to curb gender-based violence. And this event or mentorship series was part of our inaugural series that started in 2020, where we hosted speakers from South Queens and uplift their work in leadership. This event is extra special to us, not only because it's Women's History Month, but because it also features women leaders who are not only dedicated to their careers, but have close ties to South Queens Women's March since our beginning. And we're so grateful for them for taking time out of their busy schedules to spend it with all of us tonight. With that being said, for the structure of tonight's event, I will shortly be passing the virtual mic over to my co-moderators tonight, who will be facilitating the conversation with some of the questions that were pre-submitted via our Instagram and Facebook. And then we'll also have an open Q&A for everyone to ask any questions that they may have before getting to wrap the session around 7:25. As a reminder, we'll also be live streaming this event to Facebook as well as recording, so we can post it to our YouTube page for everyone that was unable to join, and so that folks can still get access to all of this incredible information. The session is also meant to be interactive, so while we do have some structure in place, feel free at any time if you have any questions or comments to drop them in the chat, and our moderators will pause to maybe ask you to unmute or ask any questions that you may have. And folks that are joining us on Facebook, feel free to drop any questions in the comment section as well. We also have them into supporting with tech on the back. We'll be able to pull some of your questions as well. So before I pass it to Afeza and Priam, just wanted to shout out both of them for their support in helping to organize this event and also co-moderating as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Afeza and just wanted to say to all of our participants, thank you so much for joining us again tonight.
Thank you so much, Nirmala. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our panel discussion titled Smashing the Glass Ceiling, a conversation with women in leadership. My name is Afeza Rozario, and I'm a proud South Queens Women's March member since the inception of this wonderful organization. And I also work for enrollment management at the newest CUNY school. It's called Gutman Community College. First, I want to say thank you to our wonderful lineup of panelists. I'm so excited to hear from all of you. And now I'll turn over to our panelists to tell us a little bit about yourself and your education background. Again, thank you so much. So in no order, the first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself and your educational background.
I guess I could kick it off for us.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, South Queens Women's March, for considering me as a panelist. I am Dana Mathura. I'm an Indo-Guyanese South Queens girl, born and raised, and I have a background in journalism. I'm currently an associate producer at Spectrum News New York 1. I started off at a community college studying communications. I finished off my bachelor's at Baruch College, where I still studied communications and minored in journalism. And then from there, I took a little break. I decided, you know what, I want my master's and I want to do it in journalism. And that's where I finished off at Columbia, getting my master's there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I will go next. Good evening, everyone. Candace Prince-Modeste. I'm a founding board member of South Queens Women's March and also serve as the Civic Engagement Chair. My background is in government administration and nonprofit management. I went to Stony Brook for poli-sci, and then also went to Baruch for my master's in public administration. During my time at Stony Brook, I interned with Congressman Gregory Luce's office, and from there is really where I started to meet a lot of folks who, now I think about it, I still work closely with, 20 some odd years later in the public administration and government. Definitely happening.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Rhonda Binda, and I want to thank the South Queens Women's March for all of the amazing work you do. And I'm honored to be here with my co-panelists. I'm proud to have been an advisory board member from the inception of the organization and love everything that you stand for. Happy Women's History Month. To tell you a little bit about my background, I am a technology lawyer by trade. I also teach at CUNY at Medgar Evers and at Queens College. And I've spent a lot of my career in and out of nonprofits and government, as well as spending some time practicing law in the private sector. And currently I'm the executive director at Gracie Mansion Conservancy, and look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you so much. So it looks like we have a diverse group of panelists today, which is super exciting. So the second question is, what does leadership mean to you?
I think for someone like myself working in the public realm, working with nonprofits, working with government, all sorts of folks from all walks of life, realize very quickly that oftentimes as a leader or perceived leader, you're going to be put in situations where people always expect you to know what to do, when to do, how to do it. And I think rule one is understanding that that's not always going to be the case. Oftentimes it's rarely the case where you know exactly how to handle a situation. Doesn't matter how many years you've been working in something, doesn't matter how many people you know, like life is life. And I think being an effective leader really means understanding that as long as you have certain basic tools to address whatever comes before you, you'll be fine. So that means like not, I guess like devaluing the folks who are on your team, not freaking out when the world starts falling apart, because it is going to fall apart on your watch. But really just trying to keep a cool head as much as possible about whatever comes across, and just understanding who you have on your team and how best you can utilize them to ultimately meet the goals that you all have set in place.
That is so powerful. Thank you.
I can go next.
Thank you.
For me, I think it's less about the work, but more about the people who you're managing. I think so often that gets swept under the rug, but you have to be a people person to understand how to be a leader. You have to communicate with them because your team is going to power everything that you do.
Thank you. People first.
Yes, and I totally agree with that. You really have to learn to cultivate the people on your team. So often with leadership, it's about being motivated yourself, but then how do you motivate those around you to make an impact? And that's what I think really makes a great leader, is someone who can execute together with a team. And the bigger the team, the more impact you have. And so a lot of it is in that management of people.
Thank you so much. I think what I've heard is to leverage the strength of everyone in the team and to not discredit anything unless you tried it, and you don't have to have all the answers. So I totally agree with that. Our next question is, what are 3 essential qualities all leaders need to be successful in their respective fields?
So I'll continue on with some of the things we just highlighted, but I think first of all, you need to have a vision for where you would like to see the team go, and you have to have some sort of goal or end post. So a lot of times that means having a bird's eye view and a long-term view. And of course, I think it's important to be self-motivated, but that ability is also, I think, very key. To motivate others, so to have that drive. And it's usually, leaders have an unusual amount of drive because it takes a lot of work often. And then the ability to execute and actually follow through and, finish what you started.
Thank you. So I'm just going to repeat the question. What are 3 essential qualities all leaders need to be successful in their field?
I think Rhonda mentioned something really great, and that's that you have to have a vision. You have to be a visionary. You have to see things long term for what they're going to be. But more than that, you have to be a game changer. Why you specifically? You have to have something that's going on that you see that other people don't, and you have to execute on that. And lastly, again, just be a people person. It is so important when you have a leadership role, when you're in a management position, you have to cultivate those relationships and make those your priority.
The first answer that came to my mind when you read the question was knowing how to count. And to your point, regardless of the field, in some way, shape, or form, you have to quantify what you do. And so being able to some other folks I mentioned before, not only having the vision, but also communicating that regularly to your stakeholder, but also being able to track and report back on what you've been able to do, what you've been able to accomplish. How many people have you touched? How many lives have you changed? How much money have you raised? How much money have you given? How many people do you need to get to the next step? How many people do you need to get to this 4th step? Like, there's always numbers involved in pretty much anything that we do. So being able to manage that, whether it's finances, bodies, people, products, whatever it is, I think having a good control over that and not being afraid of asking for help in that management, because it's so critical to telling our stories and measuring our impact.
Thank you so much. I think some of the underlying themes that I did here is to be a visionary, to be able to track your deliverables, and to have a big picture view, right? The bird's eye view. The next question is a typical day in your role. So we can take, this question is layered. We can take it in many different directions. You can talk about the flexibility. You can talk about what you wear to work. You can talk about your favorite part of the job. You can talk about the hours that you work. So a typical day at work. Or you can talk about your favorite, least favorite part.
I don't have a typical day at work because I'm insane. And so I know that on the flyer they advertise, and which was fine, my leadership with NAACP, but that's all volunteer. I get zero money for that. My day-to-day, if you want to call it, I'm a nonprofit consultant and also lobbyist. So, which is great because I don't have a 9-to-5, right? Like, I can do what I do 3 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night. But that also means that I need to work a little bit harder to structure my day and make sure that I'm actually getting done what I need to. So, like, for those of us who are working from home, have been working from home, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Home can be very enticing. My cable gives me lots of entertainment. You know, Bravo is always showing me something, and I'm like, oh, let me sit down and just this one episode. And so really trying to establish that own structure for myself has been interesting. Some days I'm really good at it, and some days not so much. But ultimately, I love the structure of my life right now. I love that I can travel a little bit more and still be able to do what I need to do. I love that I can, have some projects where I'm just at home doing what I need to do, but sometimes I'm in Long Island, and sometimes I'm in Albany, sometimes I'm in Baltimore, and, it really takes me all over. So I love the flexibility.
I'll go next. Candace, I hope that you're working in some Spectrum News New York 1 at home on that cable. For me, a typical day is not a 9-to-5, and it's not Monday to Friday. You quickly learn that working in news, that it's, the news never stops, and neither do you. But I am an afternoon to night shift, and I work weekends, but I don't mind it. And my day starts off with an editorial meeting where we just kind of go through the news of the day. We decide where to place reporters. From there, the rest of my day consists of being at my desk, writing these 20 seconds to 30 seconds readers, editing the video, putting in the headlines. From there, they go through an editing process with the higher ups on my team, or sometimes I'm writing more detailed stories called VOSOTs, and they are about 45 seconds to a minute long, putting sound on tape, which is what a SOT is, putting in that interview in there, putting in video, and then the headline, of course, and the script that goes off again to an editing process, and the anchors then read it. So that's what a typical day for me is, editing and writing.
I'd say that I have a very odd schedule because working for a cultural institution, often our events are in the evenings. So I actually do think about clothes and what to wear, and had to be reflective sometimes for whatever we're celebrating or honoring at that time. But my day is usually broken up into two buckets. One is managing the programming and the operations, which includes interacting with the public that come for tours, including private groups and school groups. And sometimes we have virtual tours like us meeting today on Zoom. And then the other part is really cultivating the relationships that supports all of our public work. So that is meeting with folks who want to support and help with the maintenance of the house, and want to continue to see that we preserve its history, and then working with those who are interested in helping to curate various art exhibits. So there's a public side of it that's working on programming, and then the other side is the behind the scenes and what you don't get to see, but there's folks behind the scenes making sure that the house is beautiful and continues to be welcoming and a hospitable place.
Thank you so much. And I couldn't agree more. It's all about behind the scenes. And even for myself, sometimes I am confused about the dress code, but I think part of it is also knowing the culture. And so our next question is, tell us a little bit about what mentorship means to you, and how do you cultivate and nurture these relationships with your mentors? Or what advice would you have for someone who is seeking a mentor?
I think that mentors can help. No one has your exact experience, right? We're also individual, but mentors can help you cut through some of the questions you have, and hopefully give you their experience so that you don't necessarily have to jump through the same hurdles and make some of the same mistakes. And that's why it's great to talk to people who have done what you've done before, and not even necessarily mistakes, but just help you get to the point that you get to your goal faster. Of course, I can't talk about mentorship without talking about sponsorship. And those are people that are, I would say, super mentors that will help you even when you're not speaking one-on-one with them, but they'll promote you even when you're not in the room, and sometimes even give you advice, that can, and give you support that that can, that goes above and beyond. Sometimes that can be financial. Sometimes that can be in a personal basis. But those who are not just there for you for the professional advice, but are really there for you in a holistic way. And I've definitely had people in my career lend their hand out to me to help me get into places that I wouldn't have been able to without that additional support of sponsorship.
I'm in the market for a mentor. So if anybody wants to be my mentor, please sign up in the chat. I definitely have people who, like Rhonda said, I can kind of call on when I'm in a pinch, if I'm just like stuck on something and I don't know which way to go. But I honestly feel like I need them. I really do. I feel like more often than not, I'm kind of feeling my way through the dark, or kind of like faking it till I make it, you know? But I feel like I can also be a mentor to other folks too, who are, especially people who are looking to get into government or the nonprofit world. But I'm very much looking for someone to mentor me. So let me know if you know anybody.
I've been lucky enough to have, I wouldn't say a mentor, but quite a good amount of people who have given me informational interviews throughout my years of reaching out to them. And I think that really just starts by networking. LinkedIn is a great source for that. My email, I check my emails so much, and they're also a great resource. So I will sign up for any and everything and just check them and reach out to folks on them just by seeing their name and what they're involved with. So it's really about that for me. And I'm early career, but I am so looking forward to paying it forward to anyone who reaches out to me with whatever advice I can give them. And I've been lucky enough to do that for a few folks who have wanted to go to the same schools I have, or to ask about, you know, jobs where I have previously worked at. And I'm looking forward to doing much more of that.
Thank you so much. Those are such powerful answers. And I do feel in different stages of our careers, we need different mentors. And I do like what Rhonda said about having focusing on holistic mentors, just not for professional or personal, but everything together, academic, professional, and personal. And our next question is, how is the work you're doing now driving the change that you want to see? It can be in your community, it can be in your professional role. You can take this question any way that you prefer.
Well, I'll jump in because I just worked on a project that we're pretty proud about. And we brought in a group of emerging and established artists, but from diverse communities. And so a lot of times with museums and cultural institutions, there's sometimes a cultural barrier in terms of having a more diverse expression, and for that being appreciated at a lot of our cultural institutions. So I'm really excited to be able to work for a mayor that wants to showcase all of New York. And I think that we're using the cultural institution to really drive change and awareness that there's so many different types of cultural expression. And even in the events that we're hosting for the first time last week, there was a Bangladesh Heritage event. And so there's, just we're driving change and acceptance and inclusion through the art and the cultural events that we're able to promote and host. And I think that it's an incredible time to be part of an organization where I think there's been a greater awareness over the past few years about how important this is. So we're able to help amplify that message through the work that we're doing.
I mean, it's really important for me in the projects that I'm working on. I mean, I think for any of us, I think that we find that we put more effort or more of our time, our heart and soul into something when we truly believe in the mission of it. So when I think about everything on my plate right now, I mean, by and large, it's things that I wholeheartedly believe in. Starting with South Queens Women's March, when I was first approached about joining the organization, it was a no-brainer, right? My work with NAACP, like, how do you not want to work toward uplifting the lives of Black Americans? And even professionally, I mean, right now I'm working with a coalition trying to ban the sale of menthol cigarettes in New York City. Menthol cigarettes have been horrible to the Black community and minority communities for decades. And then when I learned about, the targeting of those communities by big tobacco, and we're like this close to finally getting rid of it in the city and saving like thousands of lives, like how could you not do that? I even work with an entity that provides funding for nonprofits within Queens and surrounding areas but they're also looking at like capacity building efforts to help nonprofits, you know, be better and ultimately, like these are all things that are near and dear to my heart. So it makes perfect sense why I'm involved in all of these issues.
Those were wonderful answers from everyone. And for me, it's really, I've always been very community centered, and I will champion Richmond Hill and South Queens to my last days. It gives me the opportunity. I've always been very interested in local journalism and specifically hyper local. And working at a news station like this gives me the opportunity to flag stories about our community, about our Brown community, Black community, Caribbean communities. And that just brings me so much joy because I want to see our stories on air.
And Dana, if I could, I'm so happy to hear what you do, because representation, I mean, I don't have to tell this, but representation is so important. And having someone who's actually walked in our shoes and lived our experiences, be there to tell our accurate stories and not what other people think our stories are, is such a win for us. So keep doing it, girl. And I mean, something.
Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more that representation matters. I work with neurodiverse students and I love them dearly. So yes, representation matters. The next question is, with your busy schedules and all the different roles that you play, how do you maintain a sense of balance and say no and have your boundaries in the most thoughtful way?
I don't. That's very easy. I don't, which is why I need a mentor. And I think there are a lot of us on here who can attest to that. Like, we are on the precipice of breaking down, and it's funny, but it's not funny. Yeah, I need help. I said help.
Send help. You know, I don't know if this works for everyone, but I do try to find some things that really recharge me and that I really enjoy doing. You know, going out to eat is one of them. And I try to make sure that the things that bring me joy, that I make time for them. And, you know, I feel like we're like being in New York, there's a lot of variety of activities and amazing opportunities to catch a play or, you know, do something cultural. You know, I'm self-promoting, you know, cultural institutions now, but I think that if you take that time, it helps you step out of like whatever you're thinking about and whatever is like going on in your mind, and try to do things that will at least help you step out, because New York can be a very, and even if that means stepping out of New York is a very, you know, just can be a very just hectic place.
I was enjoying the laughter so much that I forgot the question. So please remind me what that was.
Of course. The question is, how do you maintain a sense of balance with all the different roles that you have? And how do you say no and have boundaries in the most thoughtful way, where it's not aggressive, but assertive?
I think that's such a powerful question to ask women, because we have such trouble sometimes setting those boundaries. But I think there's always a nice way to do it where you are being assertive and communicating that. I'm lucky enough to be in an industry where, yeah, it is, you know, 24/7, but there is a nice balance when you're off of work, that, you know, there aren't things coming at you, or at least not, you know, all the time. And again, it's just about communicating that in I think, a nice way, and doing things for yourself on your days off to get your mind off of things. And for me, as much as I love the news, it really means not consuming too much of it all the time, because that can be hectic.
Dana, that's such an important point, because I mean, in the backdrop of Women's History Month, I think to understand and recognize that for a lot of us, feel like everything falls on our shoulders to fix, to make better, to make others feel better. And a lot of times, yes, it is our job, but it's probably a lot of times it's not. And I think as best as we can really cut through a lot of the noise and figure out what's really important and what's really going to ultimately help us in addition to helping others, I think that's how we find that balance. So not necessarily always trying to be super okay, but make an impact. We can, and I think, you know, the women assembled here, we're already making an impact to local. So, but just reminding ourselves, like, we can't be everybody and we can't always swoop in and save the day. Sometimes things just need to fall apart and maybe somebody else will learn how to do this. We don't have to always be the ones.
Thank you all for leading with such love and compassion. And I'm now going to turn it over to our co-moderator to lead us through the second half of our session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Afeza.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I'm going to introduce myself briefly. My name is Priam Saywack. I am the Deputy Director of the Tenants' Rights Coalition at Queens Legal Services. Queens Legal Services is a nonprofit legal services provider. We specialize in civil legal services for low-income New Yorkers. I specifically work in housing. The Tenants' Rights Coalition is focused on more group and affirmative litigation. So we represent buildings. We help tenants fight against their landlords to secure repairs, against harassment. Generally, our mission is to stop displacement. But enough about me. I'm going to continue asking questions of all you amazing women. The next question I have, well, it's not so much of a question as it is a question. What are some myths about leadership? You can answer that however you like, but you know, what are some things that people, some assumptions that people make, or some things that people think you may have to do as a leader that you don't really feel are the best ways to lead?
I can kick it off. I'd say first that it's a role only for men or for white men. And I think that is changing. And I'm so glad that it's changing before my eyes in my generation. Apart from that, I would say you don't have to be mean. I think a lot of people think that to be a leader, you have to get stuff done. You have to be really aggressive. And that is not the case. When you learn how to communicate with people and you realize their communication style and how people react to what you're handing out, you learn how to best get the job done.
You also don't need to be front and center with your name in lights. Like, there's no point in having a team if people only know you, you know? So you can still get things done, be impactful without people always seeing all the time, all the life. It's not necessary.
Yeah, to your point, Candace, I think women have been leading all along, but maybe just haven't been getting the recognition. And so I think one of the myths is that you have to have, you know, a title, you know, and I think anybody can have an impact and lead from wherever they are, and everybody can be a leader in whatever they're doing, wherever they happen to be. So I think one of the myths is that you have to necessarily have a title to be empowered to lead, but anybody can lead.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point. And the next question really sort of piggybacks off of what all of you said, which is, how do you accept criticism or deal with criticism as a woman, and specifically, excuse me, as a woman of color in a leadership role?
I think it's one of those things where you're never really sure of the real reason for the criticism, right? I mean, yeah, like if I did something wrong, I did something wrong. If I got it wrong, like whatever. But when it doesn't make sense, you're like, okay, I'm a woman, because I'm Black, Is it because I'm younger? Is it because I'm older than the person? Is it because I live in like you're rattling off all these things. Like, which one is it about me that they don't like? Because if it were not for these things, we wouldn't have a problem. So which one is it? That's frustrating sometimes when you know it's not your performance and you know it's something else. Just can't pinpoint what the issue is.
Yeah, I would say that's such a great point. There is definitely a line of questioning I think that we do where we're like, okay, well, what is it? And sometimes you're afraid to speak out because you're questioning it so much, you let time pass. But it's always important to have a discussion about it. I've been fortunate enough to receive criticism, and because again, I'm so early career, I accept criticism. You know, I thank people for it. If you made a mistake, you made a mistake. But it's a completely whole different ball game if you know that you're being targeted because you're a woman of color. And, you know, if a work environment is hiring people based off of diversity and they're not really considering your opinion, then that's an issue. But I think it's so important for women to just speak up, speak out. And again, there's a nice way to do that without offending anyone, but you won't know and you won't make a change until you speak up for what you believe in.
Yeah, I think sometimes to level the playing field, sometimes you have to remind people of your experience and who you are and your education. Because I think often, because we're also new to leadership circles, often we are not viewed as, you know, being that executive or, you know, someone that would normally be in that role, and they automatically sort of pigeonhole you as, you know, whatever they're used to thinking about, you know, someone like you. So sometimes you do have to remind people. Sometimes it's good to set that at the beginning of conversations and meetings. And then I would say, yes, you have to, you know, do it nicely, be kind, because, you know, it's really a deficiency on their part if this is something that, you know, they're struggling with, and, you know, try to work with people so that they can, you know, evolve as people and do it in a kind way.
Yeah, I think personally, I've had the experience, you know, Candace mentioned knowing that the issue has something to do with an area where, you know, like some sort of discrimination, but sometimes, you know, I doubt myself, right? Like Nirmala mentioned, imposter syndrome, right? So even though I don't think it was something I did, I'm not sure. And I just, you know, I'm like, I just begin to wonder, did I do something wrong? So it's complicated, especially when, you know, you are younger, because you don't want to be closed off to criticism either, you know, but sometimes I really, you know, you really don't think it's anything you did. And it's just hard to, you know, is this discrimination? Is this not? And as a woman of color, I think it's just really important to know your worth and know what, you know, be able to discern to the best of your ability what's going on. It's really complicated. Tina had a great question. So her question was, do you experience resistance when you are leading men? And I guess I'm gonna just expand on that a little bit. If you do, how do you deal with that resistance? And also, you know what, I'm gonna expand a little bit more. Do you think that you experience resistance when leading white folks, or, you know, people of different religions, or just resistance in general that's related to any sort of privilege? And how do you deal with that? But men specifically, because that was Tina's question, so make sure to include that.
Thinking about all the times and what the issue was, because it, you know, it's always something different. If we can be very frank here, I think that we need to understand that there are cultural barriers that a lot of us are still dealing with when it comes to working with men in the workplace. And to be honest, most men, regardless, say what you want, whatever, most men, regardless of their background, are just not accustomed to having a woman tell them what to do, or even have it perceived as a woman accomplishing more than them, being their supervisor, so on and so forth. So just understand that a lot of times, I feel like a lot of times they don't even realize what they're doing or how they're coming off. They just know in their heart of hearts that they deserve this more than you do, or that, you know, you're in the way of them getting to where they should be. It's your fault. Never mind the person who put you in your position, the person who put them in their position. Somehow or another, it falls on you, and it's your problem that they need to deal with. So yeah, I would just remind us, folks on here, just remember sometimes it's not necessarily a personal failing, it's a cultural failing that still needs work to be undone. And I mean, trust me, it's Caribbean community, South Asian community, Asian community, like white community, like they all have the same problem. So just tread lightly, I guess. But I mean, you know, it's one of those things too, it's like, okay, well, dang, we have to work a little bit harder to prove that we belong here, because your ego won't let you accept the fact that this woman, badass, a woman of color, more accomplished than you, Mr. Senior.
I've been actually really impressed with the younger generation of men. I think that they're a lot more, open and used to having women in leadership and seeing women in leadership positions. I listened to something that great Congresswoman Meng said a couple days ago at another women's event, and she said that when she was running for Congress, her son asked her if men are allowed to run for Congress too. And I thought that was just so cute. And for me, I have a harder time, I guess what you would call managing up. So it could be a generational thing, because I really do see a difference in managing younger people and men, and their willingness to go take what you say at face value, versus when I'm trying to, like when we were talking, you can lead, you don't have to be the leader, but you're trying to lead. I sometimes have a harder time working with people as I'm trying to manage up the chain and having their buy-in and respect. And again, some of it could just be ego. I definitely have resigned myself to to accept that, as much as I don't want to. But for me, it's been more difficult on the other way around. Not so much leading people who are on a team of mine, but trying to get the messages up the chain.
Yeah, I haven't been in a position to manage men yet, but should that day ever come, I just know that it's for me, like on majority days where I am working on my team, there are some days where it's really a mix of people depending on their days off. Sometimes the team is majority men, but if I see, something in our coverage that I feel, as a woman of color, that I don't appreciate, or I feel like we can cover differently, then for me, it is about having that conversation. And sometimes it works out in my favor, sometimes it doesn't, but you learn from that moment and you just keep it pushing and you keep learning.
Thank you so much. So we're now in the question and answer portion. We have a couple of questions already though, so I'm just gonna ask those first, but please feel free to put questions either on Facebook or in the chat box here on Zoom. So the first question we have is from Facebook. As phenomenal women leaders, this is related to the last one, by the way, how do you handle any haters you have, including, if you have any, including other women? So I think this question is more, not specifically just about intersections of privilege and discrimination and, being treated differently necessarily as a woman of color, but just anybody who may be jealous of you or, have issues with you for whatever reason, which certainly does happen.
I think that one of my strengths is not respond to nonsense. I think a lot of times that's what it is. People are trying to distract you, trying to kind of throw you off balance, and trying to get a rise out of you, right? Trying to get a response or a reaction. Don't give them any. Hopefully they'll just go away. So I think being able to cut through the noise and kind of identify what's a real issue that I need to address now. What's just, chatter. Because there's always going to be, there's that part too. Don't ever expect that you're this amazing person, that everyone is going to love you and everyone is going to put you on a pedestal. Yeah, you have people who love what you do, and there are people who are going to be less than impressed. And that's, but just know that that's coming. Don't be surprised when it does. And don't feel that you have to react to it, whatever it is, because a lot of times it's pure nonsense, and it really doesn't impact your day to day. So don't even worry about it. Or, still have that close girlfriend or confidant that you can call and say what you have to say privately, and then let it go. Walk away from it and move on to the next.
Yeah, I think there's this, there has to be an understanding that once you start to do better for yourself, that it's a given. People will not always relate, understand, or they will hate. They will try to dim your light, but it's important for you to understand the reason that you started. A very wise woman told me that once. Just remember the reason that you started, why you are doing this in the first place. And another wise person also said, haters are my motivators. So just keep that in mind. And again, keep doing you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Just stay focused on the work and try not to get distracted. I know it, of course, I think when other women are attacking you, I think sometimes that's more hurtful because you expect more and we're supposed to be. But this is also, I feel like, somewhat changing. I think that that it used to be like a factor of there would normally just be one or two women at the table or in the room. And so that would cause some tension. But I really do think that this dynamic is changing, and it's hopefully going to help us as a community understand that we can just support each other and we can all do better and all boats will rise.
Great, thank you so much. The next question was from Tina. This is directed specifically at Dana, but I would love if all of you can answer it. But I guess Dana should go first because it was specifically directed towards her. But do you find women in your profession have a hard time getting promoted and or the recognition they deserve?
Oh, absolutely not. I think it's very, very pro-women. I think as long as you're doing the work and you're good at it, they have the ability to promote you. And so that's something I'm looking forward to. And I know that once you put in the work, they definitely will get you to that next stage. And, it's also like an open platform where you're allowed to pitch ideas and talk about things. And I think all of those things definitely help you to move up.
I think once upon a time, didn't see too many women in leadership positions in government, but obviously today that's very much different. City council, for example, our governor, our attorney general, like there's women all up and through this, right? And then even in terms of like business owners, I know that, as far as entrepreneurship, it's women leading the charge. If I'm not mistaken, it's women of color across the country leading the charge too. I mean, even amongst my network, number of Black women I know have their own business, are running their own consulting firms. Like, people aren't waiting for other people to help them earn a living and support their families. Like they're figuring it out themselves, and they're doing a really good job. So I think now is an amazing time for women to lead, and I really don't see, the barriers that we used to see maybe 10, 15 years ago in terms of women in leadership in government or nonprofit.
I agree. It's a great time.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions? I have a couple of questions if nobody has some wrap-up questions. But feel free to ask questions still. And okay. Yeah, so one thing that I just think would be helpful as a wrap-up question would be, what is one piece of practical advice you have for younger folks that might still be in school or at the very beginning of their career, particularly women of color?
I can kick it off. Diversify your interest. I always like to say, I tell people, find something that is a hobby that you want to pursue and find something that will make you money. I find that when you combine the two, it's a possibility, but once you combine the two, sometimes you start to hate your hobby and you never want to confuse the two, what you're making money with, and then you start to hate it. So definitely when you're young, when you're in school, there are so many people that you can open up to and who are willing to help you. With networking, with mentorships, with sponsorships, like Rhonda said. So just, the world is your oyster. Go out there, meet people, tell them your interest, start to solidify what it is that you want to do, and people will help you. And just, get out there and try a whole bunch of things, internships and different jobs, and realize what it is that you like and want to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think especially for young people at the beginning of their careers, I would say think big, dream big, be bold. And Nelson Mandela said that anything seems impossible until it's done. And I think that I've been able to go to some impossible places, that seemed out of reach. If somebody were to tell me that I'd be doing those things as a kid growing up, but if you can imagine it, you can make it happen. And especially if you're at the beginning of your career, you should just go for it. You can afford to take the risks and just have the courage to do it.
So a couple of things here. And I'm definitely preaching what I don't practice, but try to save some money. If you all haven't learned that yet in the pandemic, I'm like, life is so crazy. And one day you'll be swimming in it, and then the next day you're not, and you have to figure it out. So as best as you can, try and save a little bit more than you're doing right now. You never know. The other thing I will say, I noticed that as much as you can either try to learn to be a strong writer, strong public speaker, or someone who's comfortable with numbers, I feel like any of those three skills will almost always guarantee some sort of decent employment somewhere. Like there's certain things you can't, well, not that you can't teach it, but I find that those three are skills that are always in high demand and are useful among dozens of different industries. And so being able to hone in on any or all of those and sort of seeing, where life takes you after that are excellent skills to have. So writing, public speaking, comfortable with numbers, or mastering numbers, whether it's accounting, finance, will almost always be important.
Okay. Lastly, Afeza, go ahead.
Yes, I actually do have a question. How do you get buy-in when you have a great idea, but there's other people in a team that are, they are they're accustomed to doing things a certain way, but you have a great idea, but you just need to get some buy-in to let them, get their support. So how do you go about getting the buy-in? I know it's a loaded question.
One tactic I think is to get people to think it's their idea. And so that's how you get their buy-in. You sort of lead them towards, what you would like to see happen. And then it's great when you hear other people saying the things that you want to get done, because, that's creates the momentum. So if there's a way that you can, try to show them the way so that they come up with it on their own. That's one tactic that I've used before.
That is so helpful. Thank you. I'll definitely try that.
I think walking into the room with ammunition, showing proof, that maybe other sectors this has worked, on other teams this has worked, in other cities and municipalities this has worked. Look how great it was. We're actually behind. Like, I don't know why we haven't done this already. This is New York City, or this is whatever company. Like, we're supposed to be a leader in this field, and we're behind. Almost like bringing a sense of urgency so that folks almost feel guilty for not going along with it sooner. Coming in with ammunition and with supporting evidence as to why this is important now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Plant the seed, provide the evidence, and I think it's hard to argue with that.
And also, I think too, taking advantage of other people's lack of information or familiarity with the issue. Not to say you need to like make up stuff, but a lot of times people are resistant to something that they don't really know about. So you have to come in as the topic area expert, and leave no room for questions.
Thank you so much. Those are all great answers. I can't wait to try them out.
All right. The last question is just, is there anything important or just anything you wanted to end with? I'm asking all the panelists. Or anything we didn't touch on.
Can I just say, I think it's easy to hear a million different voices and advice from people, especially when you're young and you're starting off or throughout your life. But at the end of the day, you really need to look within and decide what it is that you want to do. And so I highly suggest just like a self-assessment, meditate on it, meditate on yourself, what it is that you want, because at the end of the day, it's your decision that matters.
Yes, I would say I learned that later on, but if I could have given, advice to a younger version of me and to people who are, starting out in their careers, that take that introspective time sooner than later, because once you it becomes a rat race, and then you're just going, and then you don't want to wake up years later and say, hey, why did I spend X amount of years, at X place? And, so do that sooner than later, so that you can figure out what your true goals are, and be able to listen to what's pushing you inside, because at the end of the day, you should be driven by your own voice.
Yeah, definitely related. I think that over the years, I've spent a lot of time worrying about if I'm going to say the right thing or do the right thing, and more I'm realizing that when I do speak up and just say what's on my mind, it actually works out pretty well. So just it's easy to say, don't be afraid to just say what's on your mind and speak your mind, but that obviously there's much more involved in that. I think we're all still finding our voice, finding our true selves. but just know that in the end, quite honestly, like it's gonna be okay. Like it's okay for someone to tell you no, that's wrong, or no, you don't want to go that route, and that's fine. But at least know that that's gonna get you one step closer to where it's supposed to be, or what the right answer is gonna be. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. You have to make mistakes. Have to. There's no way around it. So don't waste time like me worrying about making mistakes. It's gonna happen. Just brush it off, go on to the next thing. Bye.
That was all really good advice. Thank you so much for joining our wonderful panel of women leaders. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evenings. And also thank you so much for everyone who joined and listened in. I'm going to pass it back to Nirmala now. And thank you, Nirmala and Afeza, my co-moderators for this event. Well,
Thanks, Priam.
yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our Women's History Month event. It was honestly such an amazing time and well spent. Thank you all so much. A heartfelt gratitude to all of our incredible speakers for taking time to share their knowledge and all of the incredible advice. Thank you to our South Queens Women's March team, Afeza and Priam, for helping to organize this event, and Aminta for doing tech support. To all of our participants, thank you so much for coming. We'll have the recording posted to our YouTube page, and definitely follow along on our Instagram for more updates on our upcoming events. Thank you all so much again, and have a good night, everyone.